Today, we're going to go over a few things. And Jim, I love that you bring up the difference, right? Because I think this is something that we're seeing a lot of now. And I'm sure a lot of you listeners out there are hearing a lot about it, right? How to transition the wealth that you have, right? Or let's just say the assets that you have into a more tax efficient way, or maybe a way where, it is easier and more controlled for, your heirs. Well, first of all, let's go over the difference between the estate and the inheritance, right? So the estate planning side, you're more talking about the trust side, or where you have those assets at, right? Probate, if it's going to probate, if it's going to a trust, an irrevocable trust, right? Who's controlling the assets when they're pushed out, right? To the heirs, okay? And that's more towards also, this is a part that gets missed on, and this is where I really, really stress everyone to really think about when they're looking at what you're giving to your kids or your grandkids or your nieces or your nephews is, where is this money going, and how is it going there, right? Is it going to be efficient? Is it going to be taxable at the time that it is? And what are the lengths of time that it is taxable, right? Now, the other side of things where you're just talking about the inheritance side, okay, the inheritance planning is who it's going to, all right? Well, I've got kid A, kid B, and kid C, okay? So I'm going to be splitting up into maybe 34, 33, 33. Some families do 50-50. It just depends on whether you like your kids or not, right? No. Sometimes and I've got a lot of people out there that, might even want to give it to their grandkids. Hey, look, my kids are doing great. I want to give this to my kids. They're, my grandkids are turning 16, 17, 18. This is going to be their funds down the road when if I do pass away, right? So that's the inheritance side of who I'm going to choose who's going to inherit my funds, at what positions that are in, what assets that are being inherited, okay? But the estate side is what people don't worry about. People always look at that inheritance side where they're like, okay, well, I'm going to give it to this kid. I'm going to give it to this kid. What they're not worried about is how you can control the taxes that come out, right, of that inheritance of the asset. And that's where I think people really, really miss out on. And you listeners out there are probably dealing with this right now, right? Where, hey, I've got an IRA, or I've got a 401k, or qualified assets, or retirement plan. These plans were set up for a reason. They're meant for retirement. They're meant for you to take out the money over your lifetime frame. Well, the IRS puts it on the back end, right? Where now the Secure Act says, hey, you've got to take out, if you're a non-spouse, right? If you're a kid, or if you're, if you're a grandkid, or even maybe a niece or a nephew, you now have to take out that money in a certain amount of years. And that money is all taxable. What that does is for the IRS's model is now they are taking advantage of, saying, hey, you don't have any control. You have no control over whether you can take the money out next year or in 20 years, okay? You have to take out RMDs in this amount of time of years and take the full amount out at that 10-year mark. Why that's important is because a lot of people work, okay? A lot of people have earned income, right? And if that asset gets big enough, okay, what happens is that tax bracket gets higher. So the IRS is getting more money out of your pocket at the end of the day, or let's just say your inheritance money. Now, I've heard this all the time. Oh, well, they can pay the taxes. It doesn't matter. Listen, if you've got $1 million and you want to give the IRS an extra $200,000, and that's on you. Okay. I don't want to give the IRS any more than I have to. Right. So for you listeners out there, for people who are thinking to themselves, hey, I've got my plan, I've got my IRA, I've got a beneficiary. That beneficiary means nothing. Okay. Because the IRS chooses how you give it out. Right. They control how much you take out and how much your inheritance needs to take out, or your inheritor, right? So you want to really position those assets into the right place, okay? And what I mean by that, there's some clients that I do some income that comes out slowly to be able to fund another policy, or maybe to fund let's just say a life insurance plan, okay, for tax-free benefits. Or what's so common now is we're transitioning these funds into maybe a Roth, or what else? We're also transitioning into just a regular brokerage account. Why that matters is there's called a stepped up cost basis. Okay. And I know I'm getting some crazy words into here, but for you listeners out there, to make it really, really simple for you, okay, it gives you the ability to take an asset, okay, and grow the asset. And then once you pass, that asset does not owe taxes. It steps up to that cost basis of what you actually, that asset is worth, right? You buy a piece of real estate at $500,000. It grows to $1 million. You pass away when that asset's worth $1 million. That $500,000 of growth, your inheritor does not have to pay taxes on. It's called a stepped up cost basis. Now, totally different with IRAs. Okay. So this is where the two sides are different. Whether you can control the asset and be able to not give the IRS the money that you know you don't want to give. All right. And if you're out there saying, I don't really care, come on. We all know you. I mean, you want your kids. I'd rather my kids or anybody else to have my money than the IRS. Okay. And we can all agree with that.
Well, that leads me to my next question, David. I wonder, and there's a lot of confusing terms that go along with this. There's a lot of small factors that people don't know about that you did a nice job outlining right there. But why do you think so many families fail to plan for these coming events like this? Because it sends the issue. Yeah, I was going to say that it seems like the main common denominator is that people, when it comes to estate planning and legacy planning, people just fail to plan.
Well, they did. Well, and here's the deal. It's not failing to plan. I don't want to blame it on the people. And for you listeners out there, it's not your fault. It's not your job to know, right? I mean, you pay a lawyer to set up you a trust. You pay a financial advisor to give you advice on financial assets. That's just how things are. It's not your fault. And that's where the world today has to change. And we have, as advisors, have to get better for you out there. And the people out there is to advise better, right? Advise better with a plan to know, hey, if these assets are waiting, and I know a lot of my clients, right, we push on using the assets, but sometimes you have the funds that you need to where you're thinking to yourself, if you're out there, you're thinking, hey, I'm never going to use this amount of money that I have because I don't need it, right? That's exactly where a lot of people are, right? If you have over $1 million and you're thinking to yourself, hey, I only need 50 to 80 grand a year, and then my other income is going to, take care of the rest. That's okay. But learn and tell yourself, hey, the IRS is going to take a lot of this money when it goes out. Why don't I change it into something or efficiently change it into something else that will be available to my kids at a tax-free basis? And that's where a lot of people out there need to understand there are a lot of ways to do that. Okay. And I'm doing it with a lot of clients now. And if you need help with this and you're thinking to yourself, hey, I'm in that boat, David, I have a lot of IRA money or I have a lot of 401k money that I'm not going to use, right? That's where we sit down and we go over a plan to maximize the benefits for your kids. Okay. Even though you're not going to use it, that's great. Take care of you first, but maximize for the inheritance too. Okay. Don't give it to the IRS. No one wants to do that. If you need help with this is something that I think a lot of people, call in and ask about, that I think that is super important that we don't talk about enough. Okay. But again, give us a call. We can go over this together with you. We can make sure that, we're planning the right way for your inheritance and the way that it's controlled. Control it for the kids. Make sure that they're not, in a bad position to where they can't control when the money comes out or how it comes out, even if they don't need it. All right. The number to call, guys, 850-565-1705. Again, that's 850-565-1705.